Mermaids have long been the stuff of legend and lore, but the most famous story about these mythical sea creatures is The Little Mermaid. You're probably familiar with the Disney movie released in 1989 with a live-action version slated for 2023, and no one tells a fairy tale like Disney does. In their story, sassy songbird Ariel looks for love and snags her prince in the end with the help of her loyal friend. Sure, she faces some obstacles along the way, but nothing stops her happily ever after with her prince. But did you know there are actually two versions of that story? And they are very different. The original, told by Hans Christian Andersen, is a gruesome tale of attempted murder and suicide. Are you brave enough to dive into the dark history of The Little Mermaid with us? And stick around, because we've also got a few real-life mermaid sightings to share with you. I'm Chris. Thanks for watching True Crime Recaps. Before I tell you the story of the first Little Mermaid, I thought you might like to know where the legend comes from. Who was the first to suggest that the deep, dark recesses of the ocean were home to this half-human, half-fish creature? One of the oldest known stories about mermaids starts thousands of years ago with Atargatis. She was the Assyrian goddess of fertility, the moon, and water. As legend goes, she fell in love with a human, but accidentally killed him. In her grief, she threw herself into the ocean to end the life she knew and become a fish. But she was so beautiful that the other gods couldn't bear to see her destroy herself that way. So, in an effort to preserve her beauty, they stopped her transformation halfway through, leaving her a mermaid forever. Our desires can make us do crazy things, which brings us back to the terrifying original story of The Little Mermaid. In this version, the underwater princess is forbidden from going to the surface to watch the great ships sail back and forth until she's 15. Meanwhile, her older sisters pass the time by luring sailors overboard with their sweet but deadly singing voices. Over and over, our little princess, who is unnamed in the original version, watches these lifeless men float to the bottom of the ocean. Understandably, she starts to wonder what happens after death. Unfortunately, her questions have a good news, bad news answer. Her grandmother tells her mermaids can live to be 300 years old, but when they die, they turn into foam on the sea. They have no immortal soul, no afterlife. Humans, however, live to only be 100, but they have a soul that lives on forever in a glorious heaven. And faced with the choice between becoming sea foam after death or existing in a peaceful afterlife, our mermaid princess decides she'd rather have the happily ever afterlife. But how is she supposed to do that if she's not human? Not to worry, there is a solution. She needs a piece of a human soul. Don't worry, getting it isn't quite as bloody as it sounds. It's actually very romantic. When a human falls in love, their soul is shared with their loved one. Immortality in the afterlife is within her reach. And how hard could it be for the sweetest and prettiest of all the mermaid princesses to convince a human to fall for her? I'll bet you already know the answer to that. When a shipwreck sends a prince quite literally into her arms, she's smitten. After she saves his life, dare she hope that he in turn will feel the same way and give her a soul? Since this isn't a Disney movie, the chances of that happening are not bloody likely. The first clue that her road to love is going to be rocky comes when the dreaded sea witch takes her beautiful voice in exchange for a pair of legs. But she doesn't do it with a catchy musical number. No, nothing as painless as that. Instead, she uses a knife to cut out the mermaid's tongue. There's no going back now. Literally, once a human, always a human. And it gets worse. She will be the most graceful woman on land, but every step she takes will be like torture, like she's walking on knife blades. But it will be worth it once she earns a piece of her true love's soul. And she better, because never have the consequences of ending up in the friend zone been so dire. If the prince pledges his love to another woman in marriage, the mermaid will die at sunset. And you guessed it, turn into sea foam. She's doing her best to strike up a love match with the prince, but he's kind of a turd. And since his favorite pastime is watching dancing slave girls, the mermaid endures unspeakable pain so she can boogie with the best of them. But despite her best efforts, he doesn't really like her. In fact, he treats her like a lovable pet, even handing her a ballet pillow so she can curl up on it outside his bedroom door. What a prince. And as you might expect, in the end, he marries another woman. The countdown to sea foam at sunrise begins. Luckily, her sisters have been doing some backroom dealings of their own. Their long hair in exchange for an enchanted knife for their sister. If she stabs the prince, his gushing blood will wash over her legs and turn her back into a mermaid. It's her only chance to live out her days underwater. But as she stands over him and his new wife, she can't bring herself to commit murder. So she opts to take her own life instead. And just like the original mermaid, Atargatis, she throws herself into the sea. But all is not lost. Before she can turn to foam, she's saved by the daughters of the air, ethereal beings similar to angels, and they give her another way to earn an immortal soul. For the next 300 years, she'll need to do good deeds. But there's a catch. Her good deeds are only for humans who deserve them. Doing good for bad people will earn her yet another year of servitude with the daughters of the air. Yikes. We'll stick with the Disney version, thank you. But as long as we're talking murderous mermaids, we have to wonder, is there any chance these mythical creatures might actually be real? The idea isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. A 12-inch sea creature with a face, hands, hair, and a fishtail was allegedly caught in the Pacific Ocean near Japan in the 1700s. Today, its mummified remains are kept in a temple. Fitting spot for the creature with the power to grant eternal life to whoever is brave enough to take a bite of it. Then, during World War II, Japanese soldiers stationed on islands off Indonesia saw a creature that made them think they were losing their minds. It was about 5 feet tall with a human face, but a mouth like a fish and spikes on the upper body. Instead of a fishtail, this creature had arms and legs with talons. In 1967, a group of tourists in British Columbia had a marine sighting they won't soon forget. As their ferry chugged by some rocks, they spotted what looked like a blonde mermaid sunning herself on the rocks while enjoying a raw salmon. Why have mermaids fascinated humans for so many thousands of years? Well, for one, they represent a rare mix of two very different worlds, the land and the sea. And this duality is something that we can all relate to. Who doesn't feel like you're being pulled into two different directions sometimes? Plus, the idea of something so mysterious and otherworldly living on the planet with us is hard to resist. But whether you believe in them or not, mermaids will always hold a special place in our hearts. So, what do you think? Is there any truth to these mermaid sightings? And that's your recap.
Thanks for hanging out with us today.
If you like getting all the crime in half the time, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and the bell so you never miss a story.
We're here Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, but don't go away. Catch up on more recaps right here, right now.
Until next time, take care.